All right, just for the sake of time, go ahead and get started and open things up. Let's see. Let's get into it. Thanks everyone for coming tonight. I'm really excited to make this happen. This is the second time putting on this event. So very, very excited to see what kind of discussions come out of it. To introduce myself, I'm Savannah Smith. I have pronouns she, her, and I'm the event and systems coordinator with event services on the Monroe Park campus at VCU. So what are we here for anyways? The topic of eating disorders and body image and food and women's relationships with their bodies has always been something very near and dear to me. Being that from the age of 14, I have struggled with various eating disorders and just kind of like body dysmorphia and things like that, which I have been recovered from for about 2 years now, but are things that I will probably be keeping at bay for the rest of my life. Luckily, I was never hospitalized for my conditions, as my eating disorders were something I kept very private for a long time. And I was never really questioned about them, being that thinness in America about 10 years ago was often mistaken for health. But deep down, I knew that I was sick and that not eating and throwing up your food is not normal or healthy. So fast forward to about January of 2020 and gaining a healthier relationship with my food and my body, as well as following body positivity influencers and things like that. I decided to open up my social media platform to spotlight my journey, kind of showing the realness of what it means to be in a woman's body in today's society and the struggles we encounter while finding acceptance in ourselves amidst everything. So I found a passion through sharing my story, my struggles, and just overall the reality of being female in a world where our bodies, unfortunately, often speak louder than our words. So by doing that, in turn, I learned more about myself, came to accept the perfectly flawed person that I am. And I truly came to love myself thoroughly through the good, the bad, and the ugly cry. But that's why we're here today, having this discussion to spread awareness, create a safe space for sharing experiences and to learn from each other, and hopefully to inspire you all for your own self-acceptance journey. So without further ado, I do want to introduce our awesome panel that we have tonight. We have with us Bree Whedon, who is a health educator at Recreation and Wellbeing at VCU. She's a certified health education specialist and has a master's of public health and a bachelor's in clinical nutrition. She is passionate about inclusive physical activity, body neutrality, and body positivity, health at every size, and food accessibility. We also have Christina McFarland, who is a licensed staff psychologist, uses she, her pronouns. She's currently working at VCU University Counseling Services, and this is her third year in the VCU Counseling Center and the Richmond area. She specializes in treating clients with disordered eating, as well as clients that have experienced interpersonal trauma. She helps to coordinate an eating disorder treatment team that includes professionals within the counseling center, as well as doctors and the dietitian within the student health services. And in her spare time, she does enjoy hiking, baking, and chasing around her toddler, who she does affectionately call her chaos goblin, which I personally love. So thank you for being here, Christina. We also have Dr. April Gaines, who is a licensed psychologist with a PhD in counseling psychology. She identifies as a Black feminist and is an active duty Army psychologist. She will serve as the psychology consultant to the 3rd Recruiting Brigade in Fort Knox beginning this fall. Her research areas of interest include intersectionality, experiences of oppression, and body image and disordered eating in Black women, especially those in the military. She is a new mom and enjoys spending time with her family and friends and traveling. So thank you for being here as well. And lastly, we do have Emma Manis, who is a 26-year-old fashion designer, stylist, and creative director who has used the past 3 years of her recovery for anorexia to affect change in the fashion industry by creating her own brand, Evolve, that aims to promote diversity and inclusion in all that they do. Throughout her work with Evolve over the past 3 years, Emma has dedicated her life to helping those seeking recovery for eating disorders, raising awareness, and remaining a constant activist for change in the media and fashion industries. She hopes to change the meanings of true inclusivity and representation and empower women to change the way they see themselves forever. Emma believes that body inclusivity and representation is no longer an option, but it is an expectation. So thank you all 4 of you for being here. Again, I'm so excited to get started on this. I do have a quick poll for everyone to answer if they are comfortable in doing so. It's just a quick few questions. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that before we get into the panel questions, just to kind of set the tone and get ready for tonight's discussion. All right, I think we almost have everyone who's answered. So just to kind of reflect on these results, looks like every single person answered yes to the first question, which is about feeling worse about your body or self-image after being on social media, which I think everyone can relate to, obviously. Everyone answered yes to the second question as well, as far as comparing yourself online. And then looks like almost everyone said yes as well to the third question about feeling the need to eat less or exercise more in comparison to other women's bodies. Looks like everyone kind of was on the same page about all of these. Number 4 was about 50-50, about being comfortable with the relationship with food. So that's kind of interesting. I know I don't always have the perfect relationship with food, so props to those who do. That's awesome. Okay, awesome. Looks like we have about 50-50 for the last one as well. Okay, well, perfect. So I think that oftentimes we believe we're alone in the way that we feel about our bodies, but I kind of feel like just seeing from this poll from a small group of people, you can see that there are other people who do feel the same way. And even men are included in this as well. According to the National Association of Anorexia Nervosa and Associated Disorders, about 9% or 28.8 million of the American population will have an eating disorder or show disordered behaviors regarding food or their bodies in their lifetime. So hopefully tonight's panel discussion will kind of encourage everyone to continue reflecting on these things and continue strengthening the relationship with yourself as well, and just kind of remind yourself to give your body some grace, as it does so much for you every day without you even knowing. And most importantly, my biggest wish for tonight is that it reminds you that you're not the only one feeling the way that you do, and that there is a way to live your life in a body that you love and cherish, no matter how much it may change. So keeping all of that in mind, let's go ahead and get into the panel questions, unless anyone has anything to ask or comment before we get started. Okay, awesome. So the first question I have for the panelists is, what factors, be that positive or negative, in your life have influenced your relationship with your body as a woman? And whoever wants to go with first can just hop in.
I can start with this one if you want.
Sure.
I'm Emma, so thank you so much again for having me tonight. I'm very excited. So as far as this goes, I think that a lot of the negative influences in my life had to do with the environment that I was in, which I'm sure we can all kind of relate to in some way. But when I started going through my recovery experience, I realized how common it was that women bonded over the things that they didn't like about themselves. Like, the more I opened up my eyes to it, the more that I saw almost every conversation I was walking into, someone was bringing up something they wanted to change about themselves, or a new trend fad diet that they were trying. And it really kind of connected the women to each other that were in that conversation, because it was, that feeling of, like you were just saying, Savannah, knowing that someone else has that experience kind of, I guess, validates that in a way. So that was a huge influence on the way that I viewed my body. Was just listening to other people and like, you know, if I looked like someone else who wanted to change the way that they looked, then should I want to change the way that should look too? But there were like positive things too that I think influenced more of my recovery experience to get me where I am now. And a big part of that was finding people who didn't center every conversation around like how they looked or their weight or what they were eating. Like the more that I started to shift my perspective and shift into conversations where, you know, women were talking about doing the things that made them feel good or like the ways that they were giving back to their communities. I guess that was a really big influence for my body image shift, because it made me really realize like, you know, I have a lot more to offer than just my appearance. And I like so many other pieces of me that are like getting left out of living this life that I wanted to like really bring into my experience here on this earth. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, Emma. Whoever wants to go next can go ahead.
I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Bree. It's really nice to be here. I am pretty sure this is the first panel I've ever been on, besides when I was 13 and I was on this panel about like incoming middle schoolers, like what questions do you have? I'm really excited to be here. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. I sort of wrote down like one negative and one positive that tie into each other. So I was a competitive ballet dancer all growing up and through college, and I loved to dance. Like that part was amazing, but a huge part of ballet is just staring at yourself in the mirror, and even worse, I guess, like having adults staring at you, and you become so aware of parts of your body you never even thought of. Like I remember a teacher told me I had a perfect neck. And so like from then on, I was always like, oh yeah, look at my neck. Like don't look at any other part of me, just look at my neck. And I was taller than all the other girls. At certain parts of my life, I was bigger than all the other girls. And it was very difficult to just look in the mirror every single day. And I definitely think that that fueled me thinking that I was very healthy by eating like 800 calories a day. And then after I graduated, I transitioned into becoming a fitness instructor at what was fortunately a really inclusive bar studio, where I was very much exposed to the idea that your body can move and it can do all of these amazing things, and it doesn't matter what your body looks like. And so that was a really excellent positive experience for me, just sort of like celebrating what my body can do and not how other people perceive it, or whether or not it's, you know, someone else's definition of perfect.
Thanks, Bree.
Yeah, I think I'm Christina. I'll share that I am getting over an illness that my little toddler generously brought home from daycare. So that's where I'm at. But in terms of what Emma, you were saying, it reminds me of that scene in Mean Girls where like they're all standing in front of the mirror and then everyone looks at her to expect like, okay, say something you don't like about yourself now. And in reflecting on this question for me, I thought similarly to how other panelists thought of like a positive and a negative. And I was thinking as early as like middle school, growing up, high school, thinking about the influence that like my mom had in terms of how she talked about her body and her relationship with food, and hearing all that at an age where I didn't think to question it. And so like crash dieting became very normalized, making negative comments about her body. So me making negative comments about my own body got very normalized, or pushing off any kind of like positive feedback about like if she made a negative comment and somebody was like, no, that got pushed off. And I think that really normalized that for me. And it wasn't just my mom. I saw most other adult women in my life doing the same thing. And so to me, I was like, okay, this is just how we talk about our bodies and how we have our relationships with food. And I think something that was like, in terms of my journey of transforming from that, something that has been a really positive shift for me was having a baby. Being pregnant and having a baby, I think, was the first time where I really, really adequately reflected on like what my body can do and how bananas it is that I grew an actual human being. Like I look at him and he's a fully formed human being. And I'm like, I grew that. I made that. And like feeling pride in that and like just like wonder and awe and really trying to continue to apply that because my body has been doing cool stuff before that. Like before that, I was playing sports. I was going on like 5-mile hikes. Like my body was carrying me through and performing in a lot of really amazing ways. And I wasn't recognizing that. And I think having a baby has really helped me shift to being able to recognize like the badass things that my body can do rather than focusing more on like just how it looks.
Thanks, Christina. April, I'm gonna go ahead.
Yeah, so I can wholeheartedly 100% agree with that point, Christina, of having a baby. So I guess I'll start with my positive. That had absolutely, there were two things, I guess. So one was definitely having a baby because, yeah, growing a child. Also, my pregnancy was such a great experience of just getting to know my body for what it was. And I dealt with infertility for 3 years before actually having or getting pregnant. And that reinforced things that I didn't realize that I already struggled with body image. It reinforced some of those things that had to do with just how I view my body in general and my relationship with my body. And so being able to carry my child full term and have a wonderful unmedicated, like super flowery woo woo birth experience was just so healing and corrective of my body showing up for me, right? Like that idea of that Christina was talking about of, you know, you've carried me through a lot of different areas in my life. I've asked a lot of my body and it's always shown up. And so like for me to be grateful for that. So that was definitely a huge perspective shift. And I would say the other positive influence on me was literally just grad school of having body image become a area of research interest for me. It, obviously of taking in the information, it just, makes you realize that one, you're not alone. And that two, there's like words to describe what you have experienced or, maybe somebody who's experienced that. And also just like giving me language of how to connect with and relate to my body in different ways that I had not considered. Um, yeah, so just different ways. So like, for instance, my hair and knowing that that was a really big important part of like how I view my body image, and how other women of color and just women in general tend to view their bodies through multiple different areas of, how they see themselves. Some negative influences though, again, early as middle school, I vividly remember, well, I would say even elementary school, like having to get your weight like when you're in line for health. I don't know why we did this. I don't know if they still do this to children. Um, and then like them shouting out what the number was, and then you're comparing. And at that time, you don't really even know what that means, but you just know higher or lower, right? And for whatever reason, higher felt bad. And then I remember vividly in 7th grade, I had a gym teacher actually, and this wasn't a negative experience, but it was it just kind of stick with me of like how I've thought about my body. So I was always an athlete. And I remember in our health portion of the class, them getting us to calculate our BMI. And, when you realize where your BMI falls, and again, I was always an athletic child. I have lots of hips and thighs for days. And so I, didn't fit in like what was considered normal. And I'm a 7th grade, like teenager. And I remember being like, feeling some type of way about that. And I remember my gym teacher saying, you probably will never meet this BMI standard. He was a Black man. And he said, you will never meet this BMI standard because it's not really meant for people like you. It's not really meant for, Black people. It was not really meant for Black women that have certain body types. He was like, Serena Williams doesn't meet BMI standards either. And from that moment, like I remember having that in the back of my mind, but then also made me compare myself to Serena Williams, which is like, who the hell, like I'm not Serena Williams. So my thought was that, okay, well, as long as I stay an athlete, as long as I stay active, then I'm the good person that's within the BMI that doesn't fit, like that's I'm considered overweight or obese, but I'm a good overweight or obese, versus like if I don't move my body, I'm a bad overweight person or obese. So those messages stuck with me quite some time. And then the biggest one being the military of, even though I'm in the military, you're probably like, well, why did you join? But I did JROTC in high school for all 4 years, and then I did ROTC in college. And it was there's a lot about the military, which we'll probably talk about tonight, of how just the standards that are expected of you and how they don't necessarily align with even what you consider to be good for your body. But because it's a part of a standard that you must meet for your job, you kind of find yourself doing that. And that was definitely a point in my life when I started to turn to more disordered eating behaviors that I, again, didn't have words for until I got to graduate school. So that definitely negatively influenced how I view my body. And it still is a part of like just, constantly working through that now.
Thank you, April.
I'm also in my car, guys, so just bear with me.
Yes, April's coming to us from Texas, so she's on a different time zone right now. But thank you for answering that first question. Before we go on to the second, I definitely feel like I need to chime in. Just I always have so much to say about all of this anyways, but I love that you brought up BMI, because I have a specific childhood memory as well, being maybe barely 10 years old, 11, 12 possibly. But I remember being told by my pediatrician that I was obese. This is my cat, by the way. I remember being told by my pediatrician that I was in fact obese, and I was literally, again, before puberty. I had, like the baby fat on me still and that kind of thing. And I remember that being just like so impactful. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm obese. Like, what? That can't be right. Like, so that was very, I don't know, foundational, and I guess the disordered habits that I picked up later. And then I also love that moms came up, because you do learn a lot from your mom and how you talk to yourself and things like that. And I remember once I was recovered, talking with my mom about my eating disorders, like things that I had never told her and things that she had never known. And she was like, yeah, like when I was a teenager, I like made myself throw up a few times too. Like everyone does it. It's normal. I'm like, that's not normal, So like, I think it's just really ingrained, and it can almost be, like systemic even. I'm sure that's something that she kind of picked up from her mom as well, but all very good points. So on to the second question. Why do you think disordered eating is often normalized among women, and especially like young women as well?
I guess I can go again, just cycle through the same order. So I think this like goes back to the bonding thing that I was talking about. I think like having those shared experiences and having them validated by someone saying like, oh yeah, like me too, have you tried this? Like this worked for me, maybe this would work for you. I think that really like creates the idea that we need solutions to these problems. And I think like beauty, fashion, media industries, sell these products to us and put these beliefs in our heads too, because they are trying to make money off of us. So the more we are obsessing over the way that we look, and the more that, we're trying to spend all of our time and energy and money on these things to see like improvements, the more money that they're making, and it's taking us away from the things that we're actually meant to be doing here. And I think like we've talked about with the moms thing, like I think it definitely is a generational thing where it was really normalized for them, but that doesn't mean that it needs to continue to be normalized. Like we have the power to kind of take that back and like shift the narrative. And I do think like in society it has gotten a little bit better, but I think because we have social media and because we have, body positive movements that were created by people who have lived experiences of how harmful and impactful fat phobia is, and like how impactful, like Savannah, you said that you share on your platform, how impactful these things are. We're kind of getting more of an inside look into how we can stop normalizing that stuff, which I think is a really cool shift to see. speaking more on the positive side of things. But I definitely think, we kind of have to get to the root of any problem, but specifically this, and kind of work from the inside out to change those conversations and have the hard conversations that a lot of people don't want to be having. So.
I can go next.
Okay, go for it.
Oh, I didn't even see. I'm sorry. But I do think that, objectification of like women's bodies in particular is just so prevalent that you learn to start to value yourself or devalue yourself based on pieces and parts of who you are versus who you are as a whole person. I can recall as early as 13 when I was going through puberty of like family members making comments of like telling my mom like, oh, you're gonna have to like put a sign on her that says that she's only 12 or only, I think it was 11 actually, in the sense that like I was developing and that men would be looking at me is what the implied part was. And how sick and twisted that is, right? That also meant part of me paying more attention to how I looked. And I think that happens with young girls in general. And then I'll say also, like culturally speaking, I did not have a whole lot of experiences growing up where I was chastised for like what my body looked like. If anything, it was celebrated or overly celebrated. And I felt sexualized at a very early age. And a lot of Black women speak to this experience as well. But what I noticed is that if I came home, for instance, from college break, you looking real skinny, or you need to eat more, or you gained a lot of weight over the past whatever. It was like small comments like that would happen at family gatherings that weren't like a whole conversation wasn't happening about it, but it was said and you heard it and you felt it. And I think that happens in a lot of people's households too. And then I would say also from the cultural aspects of eating disorders and issues with your body has typically been a white woman's issue, right? And what ends up happening is that a lot of people have been excluded from the conversation, and even like our parents, my parents, not even acknowledging that that's something that their child could be struggling with, or that's something that they have struggled with in their own lives. And I think, the lack of intersectionality in body image research and the eating disorder community in general, has lent itself to that, and that we know that that's true. So I think that there's that part of objectifying our bodies in general. So a lot of people are just focused on it, as well as some of the cultural aspects of how we talk about our bodies, how we talk about food, has influenced, definitely how young girls even look at themselves from a very early age.
Yeah, for me, something I was thinking about with this is sort of like what Emma was sharing about how things are getting better, but they're not all the way there. I mean, like if I go back and I try to rewatch like Friends, which was one of my favorite shows in high school, like it is almost impossible to watch because there are so many little snide comments about someone's weight or about what someone's eating or not eating. And it's just everywhere. It's like ingrained in us in a young age from these shows that we watched when we were kids. And fat characters are usually seen as a joke in these types of shows, or if they aren't in the show and they're not a joke, their entire plot point is that they want to lose weight. And so there's just not a lot of like representation out there for different body types. And that is something that is getting better when we're thinking about like mainstream TV, but it is still, there's like the one token, like I'm thinking about Euphoria, there's like the one token larger character, and it's better, but it's still in kind of ingraining that in us, that there's like the normal and then there's the fat character.
Yeah, when I think about this, I think of like echoing what April and Emma were saying around like what April was talking about what we value women's bodies for. And if what we're still valuing them for is how they look, then any behavior that is in line with getting them to look a certain way is going to be normalized. And then thinking about what Emma mentioned, which is like, there's money to be made from it. There is a lot of money to be made from normalizing like an unhealthy relationship with your body and food, whether it be multi-level marketing skinny tea or different like beach body programs on Instagram, different diets. Like there is a ton of money out there to be made in women not feeling comfortable in their bodies.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, on the flip side of that, what does a healthy relationship with your body mean to you?
For me, it's sort of knowing that I'm never going to love my body 100% of the time, and that's okay. Like, I don't really love anything 100% of the time. And it's okay to have days where my body just exists, and I'm appreciative that it exists and that it's here, that it helps me out to do all the things I want to do. And I just accept it for what it is, not what it could be. And just kind of understanding that I don't owe a certain body to anyone. It's mine. And so it just belongs to me.
Yeah, I think for me, it's toggling between that like body neutrality and body positivity of like my goal being more body positivity, but recognizing that sometimes where I'm at is body neutrality and being able to be like, you know what, my body is doing what it needs to be doing. And I can be thankful for that. And that's where I'm at today. And I think for me, a healthy relationship with my body has really meant letting go a lot of like the rules and compensatory behaviors I used to think about of like, oh, I can only eat in this time frame, or if I eat this certain thing, I have to work out more. The idea of like deserving certain foods. And so letting go of rules around food and compensating for eating. And I think that has been like really important in thinking about like what a healthy body image looks like to me. I had another thought and I lost it, but I'll come back to it.
I will admit, when you first sent these questions, I was like, "Oh, we going there tonight? Okay," um, because what healthy relationship, Savannah? I don't know, but honestly, I think that a lot of us are still figuring it out, and I know that I am. Right? I definitely felt like this very, again, like I felt like a goddess when I was carrying my child, and then afterwards, I'm like, okay, like I know you just gave me the strength to be able to get through this process, etc. Talking to my body, and now I'm trying to figure out how my body is sustaining me now and what that means for me. And so I think at this moment, a healthy relationship, what it means to me is being able to just like accept, and not even accept, to just appreciate really where my body is. And no matter if that means that there is something I want to change about my body, I think that that has been an interesting process for me, is to learn that I might not actually like the way that I look, but I don't like it for myself. Like, and it's not a self-imposed, it's not imposed by society, it's not imposed by anything else. It's literally my own opinion, right? And being comfortable that I'm now in my own shoes, I guess, to really feel like I can own how I feel about my body. Um, and so, yeah, there's parts of me that I don't like right now, and being okay with that, I think that's really hard to sit with, but I know that that's healthy for me, versus trying to be completely 100% of anything, like someone else said earlier, of that's like just not realistic for me. And I'm sure it's not realistic for anybody. I'm not gonna, um, I don't know how other people like get through that on a regular basis, but I just feel like it's a process. And so maintaining just, I guess, insight to know that it's a process and know that it can change at any given time, and being okay with that. And I really just want to be in a contract with my body of just like, okay, like I know I might not say all the right things to you, I might not give you all the right things, right? but I'm here and I want to do this with you. And so I really would like to join with my body more often, and in gentle ways, but that doesn't always happen, but that is like what it would mean to me. So yeah.
Yeah, April, as you were talking about like being realistic with yourself, I think sometimes I struggle with like that idea, and it reminded me of what I was thinking of before, that idea of like, okay, either I have to like love my body and like really go 100% at that, or I'm like not where I want to be. And so being able to set like realistic goals for what I want that like healthy relationship to look like. And like my one that I am still working on but getting better at is I will not keep clothes anymore with the intention of I'm gonna fit back into them. And so I think that has been like, I'm trying to set like realistic, achievable things that don't feel as like big and heavy as like, okay, I'm just gonna figure out how to love my body. Like, okay, no, I'm just gonna get rid of those jeans I know I'm not gonna fit back into that are just making me feel bad in my closet, and buy new jeans and then get excited about my new jeans and my new tops and like feeling myself and how I look in those. And so like being realistic about it, I think, and like setting like achievable goals has been really helpful.
I definitely want to echo what both of you guys said. I think that's so important that it's really about the journey and the process. And I don't think anyone who has been in recovery even for years would ever say that every day is perfect, because that's like, we're human and we're going to have days that, you know, the first thing that we go to is kind of taking it out on ourselves, because we're all our biggest critics. So I think like for me, kind of taking what you guys said, that has been a huge piece of it, is just, you know, not expecting perfection, but also really trying to listen to what my body is telling me, and building that trust over time. That has become having a healthy relationship with me. And like, when I say trust, I don't mean necessarily like just always knowing like what to eat, because that just still doesn't happen. But it's more so like, you know, if my body is telling me to slow down and not go work out that day, I'm building trust with my body by listening to it and not trying to fight against it and do something that I know is going to hurt it in the long run. So I think, you know, building that trust and developing a healthy relationship in that way, where I can really listen and also respect what my body is asking me to do for it, for in return for everything it's done for me, has been really powerful. And like, I remember being way back in the depths of my eating disorder, and you know, even if I really really was craving something, I would still tell myself no and not give myself the thing that my body really needed. So now when those cravings do come up, that's something I've really, you know, practiced, is just trying to respect that, and, you know, giving myself that craving because it is something that my body is asking for in that moment. So that's been kind of a big growth point for me in my recovery. But
Awesome. Okay, so how can folks who struggle with an unhealthy food or body relationship, or if they have disordered eating, how can they incorporate like gentle nutrition or intuitive eating into their lives without causing unhealthy or obsessive behaviors? This can be like actual medical advice or experience, whatever applies to you. So.
I think when I think about this question, it's important to reflect on where the person is at with their disordered eating behaviors. Because if someone has been engaging in disordered eating for a while, intuitive eating is really based on following your hunger and satiation cues. And when you engage in disordered eating for a long amount of time or a sustained amount of time, you can sometimes lose touch with those cues. And so sometimes it can be about getting on more of a schedule with eating to reestablish what those cues are so that you can follow them. And so I think that, like, in terms of how to approach that, it depends on where the person is at, because I think that if you don't have hunger and satiation cues anymore, it's going to be hard to apply intuitive eating. So it's going to feel like, oh, I'm never hungry, therefore I'm intuitive eating. But then that's not the point of it. And I think the whole point behind intuitive eating is to not establish like rules and kind of those guidelines. It is to build that trusting relationship that people were talking about with their body, to trust your body to tell you based on like cravings or hunger cues what it needs. But sometimes you need to backtrack a little bit and establish more of a routine so you can get back to those hunger and satiation cues, and your body can get back to trusting you too, that your body will trust you, that when it gives you hunger cues that you'll fulfill those hunger cues, because I think that trust can start to work both ways.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with everything Christina just said. And also the idea of like, I have sometimes, and I've used this and I've recommended to clients before, of just like mindful eating, right? Of just like being so into, and it's really fun actually, because you get to uh, engage all of your taste buds of just like how good or juicy the steak is, and like how, oh, it's so like how it feels going down that, like all of those things, even though it sounds crazy, but just taking the time to appreciate the food, to appreciate how it feels, and all the sensations that come with it, makes you actually, one, appreciate your meal more, two, not like, it can help stop with especially binging behaviors. And then I would just say that like getting a good nutritionist. And so that being someone who understands, I had a really good nutritionist tell me there's no such thing as bad or good foods. There's literally foods that are more protein dense, more nutrient based, et cetera, right? So off the bat, that let me feel safe of like, culturally, I can still eat my foods, right? There's nothing bad about the food that I eat or the food that I love. And then two, she recommended when I do feel a craving, or if I do feel that I want something, to eat a snack, right? And then if I still feel a specific way, that perhaps is not something, perhaps it's not hunger that I'm responding to, but that there's something else that my body wants. So, for instance, like taking a hot bath, or putting on some lotion, like giving myself a lotion type rub down or whatever, taking a walk, or it could be, any number of things that means tending to myself. Because for me, on the opposite end of engaging in overeating or binging, sometimes that was a thing, right? So sometimes we only think about like restricting our food intake, but also instances where we are overeating, or we find ourselves eating to a point where we're no longer comfortable. And so how to respond to those hunger cues was like, okay, maybe all of them are not actually hunger cues. And so that advice of feed yourself, like give yourself something, and if you still are hungry after 10-15 minutes, because it takes some time, then maybe respond in a way that you are attending to things that your body does need from you. Like, I need you to sit the fuck down sometimes, right? Excuse my language. That is what my body is telling me sometimes. So me having a meal at a fast food restaurant is not that, because now I'm in the drive through and now I'm just continuing about my day, when really my body was like, no, can you go take a nap or something and drink some water? That's what I would like for you to do. So just like being able to attend to literally my needs, just kind of like how Emma had mentioned, of building that trust, I think can be very helpful in just guiding the way that we might engage with food, for instance.
April, I love what you said about good and bad foods. Like, that is something I literally have stuck to since I started going through recovery. And I don't even know that I'm at the point where I'm doing intuitive eating yet necessarily. I'm actually still seeing my dietitian every other week. So I have a very, very busy work schedule. So it's hard for me sometimes to like do this 6 meals a day where I have to sit down and prepare these things. So I think a really big piece that has helped me is like finding something that works for my schedule and not trying to like fit myself into all these little boxes of like, I'm a people pleaser. So I really like to check things off and like do things the way that I'm supposed to. But I think that, when you're learning to trust your body and build a relationship that's healthy with food in your body, you do have to, kind of work around it and see what is actually going to be best for you. So like for me, with the way that my work is, I do set alarms for myself because I need that reminder to, go take a pause, take a minute for yourself and do this for you. Another thing that has really helped me a lot is also meal prepping, and just kind of getting that out of the way so I don't have to think about it on the spot, because that gets really overwhelming to me when I'm trying to, make sure I have enough proteins and fats and, carbohydrates. So it's easier for me to kind of do that prepping, know that my body is getting what it's needing in that moment, and kind of continuing on with my day. So.
Yeah, I just like totally agree with what everyone's saying about building that trusting relationship with your body. And it's definitely a process. I just sort of approached this question from my own personal experiences, since I'm not like a practitioner of nutrition or anything. But the biggest thing for me that was so hard was deleting my FitnessPal, the app, and any other like calorie tracking app that I was using. I donated my Fitbit because I had such a mindset of like, I really enjoyed tracking my calories and I like really enjoyed the satisfaction of hitting a certain number of steps. And that was really difficult for me personally to do. And that was definitely like a solid first step toward more intuitive eating, or just eating for myself and not for the app.
Oh, I hate that app. I had gestational diabetes when I was pregnant, and they were like, you have to download this app because you don't know how many carbohydrates are in each thing you eat. You just don't know it. And I was like, please don't make me, because I know it's going to become a thing that like I don't want in my life. And it's going to be hard for me to let go of. And still, I can't unknow some of the things I know from that app, even though as soon as I had the baby, I deleted it immediately. I think like with this question, I also was thinking about like in terms of intuitive eating, and like when we talk about like, okay, your body is going to tell you what you need, different proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and things. I think when I am talking like to my friends or even with clients, a lot that comes up is like, okay, well, where do things like cake and cookies and sweets and candy fit in? And I think about like food is fuel for sure. It gives us energy, it powers our body, but that's not the only thing that it is. I think food is also a very big source of connection and can be really important in different like cultural celebrations. And so recognizing that like food also has other purposes in your life and is connected to other things you value, potentially like family, friendship, connection, like community. And so being able to have like that bigger picture of it, and even applying that bigger picture and flexibility to like not just looking at like, okay, what am I eating today, but like, what have I eaten this week? What have I eaten this month? And approaching it in that more like flexible, non-judgmental way. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I was going to say I love, but I don't love that MyFitnessPal came up, because that was definitely one of the tools that I used to like fuel my disordered behaviors. And it was just like a downward spiral, and very quickly and very easily became super toxic for me and addicting. So definitely like anytime, like you were saying, Christina, anytime anyone like suggests it or brings it up, I'm just like, I like cringe so hard, because I'm just like, no, that is not like, it may be helpful for some folks, but definitely for me, that was just like a traumatic thing, and that should never come back. So totally agree on that front. So for the next, oh, go ahead.
I have one other thing, just a shameless plug for my profession. Go to therapy. Like that is what someone is there for. Like if you can't talk about, you know, your deepest, darkest secrets about how you feel about food and your relationship to food and your body and what it's been causing you to think about yourself and the way that you show up in the world, you should be able to talk about that in therapy. And so even if they don't have all the answers for you necessarily, I think just having someone to talk about that with in a non-judgmental way, who's not going to join with you and like, oh yeah, me too. That is, it just can be very helpful. So that is awesome.
Awesome. So our next question is, what are some eating disorder or disordered eating warning signs that folks could look out for in themselves or in friends? And I guess this can speak from like professional advice or experience as well, if you've experienced those side effects as well.
I personally like tied this one into the last one a little bit. Constantly tracking everything that you're eating or like lying about what you eat to the app. That was something that I did a lot. I would be like, well, I actually only ate 5 almonds when I didn't. Not eating like out of fear that it won't fit their calories that they had on the app, or like not eating in front of people because they know that like they just don't want to deal with like that judgment. Those are just some things that came up for me.
I'll kind of speak to some of the things that I went through. So, you know, avoidance of meal times, like Bree was saying, something that I did a lot was cutting up pieces or any of my food into smaller pieces. It was just a way to continue the avoidance. Obviously, if this is like normal for someone, then that's a different story. But you know, it was the way to like fill up my plate and then eat as little as possible, but making it look like I ate a lot. I would like anytime eating out, I was always order something that wasn't always like nutrition dense. So whatever I could find that, you know, was the least amount of calories or seemed like the least scary to me at that time. And then also like using the bathroom right before or after a meal. And lastly, very intense, emotionally driven reactions like that were kind of unwarranted for the circumstance. I was so like deeply deprived of any nutrition that my brain was not functioning at that point. So I couldn't regulate my emotions or how I was feeling. And, you know, I tended to lash out at people even when they were trying to help me. So that was something like that all of those things I wish someone kind of would have, you know, helped me with a little bit sooner. But if you do know, I just wanted to like definitely say this, if you do notice that someone might be experiencing these things, don't ask them about it in front of other people, for one thing. Always try to approach it from a place of support, and ask, you know, what you can do to support them, what's, you know, going on in their lives. And don't ever tell them, you know, that they're too skinny or too fat or need to eat more or eat less, because that's never your place. And your job as a support in someone's life is to do just that, give them support and get them to the person or the place that they need to be able to heal from whatever they're going through. So.
Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm coming from a nurse's perspective. I have a daughter that's had an eating disorder. And I'm a nurse, and right now I'm just started a job recently, and I'm taking care of patients with diabetes. And so it's kind of really hard for me because for the last, 6, 7 years, all I've, my brain, we think about all food is good. But then now all of a sudden I'm dealing with a different population, and I guess what I'm looking for is advice from people as to how can I be sensitive to people's needs. I want to be there for them as a nurse and do education and take care of these people, but it's hard to sometimes know what to say. I don't want to be triggering. How can I do my job well? Any advice from anybody?
Hi Lori. My mom is actually also a nurse, and she has really just tried to, you know, when she can, if the family is available to talk to, ask, if there's anything extra that the patient will need for support, or anything that she can provide. I think that's always going to be just a tough thing because she is very torn too. Obviously, like she also has a daughter who has experienced this, but she also has to do her job as a nurse and make sure, people are taking care of themselves. I think um, that's a tough one. But I think the most important thing that she has done is really just try to be compassionate and kind and patient, like you say that you've already been doing, because you're not like eating disorders we know don't have any appearance. So I think you're not going to ever be able to walk into a room and know exactly what to do or say. But I think if someone does let you know, being able to kind of just offer them kindness and grace and patience throughout that process while also trying to give them the care that they need for whatever it is they're going through. I don't know if that was helpful or not, but
No, I mean, just listening to everybody talk and hearing what people's experiences are is just helpful to understand the whole eating disorder thing. And just, I try to let people know that, just because you're diabetic doesn't mean you can't eat and you can't enjoy your food. And I want them to celebrate with their food. I want them to, eat the good things and enjoy their meals. And we tell them it's possible. So I just want to be careful. So I figure the more I learn, the better I'll do.
Well, I think it definitely is possible. Like I only obviously had a brief stint on having to follow a more restrictive diet with a lot more rules than I really was comfortable with gestational diabetes, but everything still fit. And I think that is the very validating part where, like, yeah, someone might not be able to have an entire plate of pasta and still have the numbers that are in line with like what would be healthy numbers for them, but can still have that. Or like if I was craving chocolate, like I got these like dark chocolate coconut things that were like delicious. And so it took a little bit more work sometimes to find things that fulfilled those like cravings I was having and to follow those cues, but it definitely was still possible. And I think that I also learned to embrace a little bit of flexibility with that, where I wasn't going to have perfect numbers all of the time. And if I didn't have one perfect number, that didn't mean everything was ruined. And I think that, obviously that medically, you don't want to be like, well, whatever, no numbers, who cares? But at the same time, recognizing that like there can be a little bit of flexibility there and not have lasting consequence. And also just validating, like, if somebody wants pasta or wants chocolate, wants a cupcake, rather than just being like, well, you can't have that, so that sucks. Being like, yeah, validating, yeah, cupcakes are delicious. Let's find something that like you can have that's gonna like really get that like craving met, even if it can't be that specific thing. So I think in that way, you're validating what they want and not saying like that's bad or this is good, but saying, okay, let's find a way to do it. Let's find a way together. And I think that validation goes a really long way.
Yeah, because I think the medical field is so lacking in their understanding of eating disorders to the point where it's like almost embarrassing, because of course the first thing we do is we walk in the doctor's office and they want to stick you on a scale. And of course, I've literally told people don't say anything about their weight and they'll blurt it right out. And it just makes me crazy. I mean, I've literally gone off on people for doing that. And it's embarrassing that we know so little. But that's kind of one of my goals, is to try to teach people in the medical field something about eating disorders, so people are sensitive to everybody's needs. Just like the fashion industry, we're finally starting to see models of all shapes and sizes. And I think we're getting educated. It's just taking a long time.
Well, I think, speaking to my own experience, I think it would have been really helpful to have a medical professional, the one that was saying, hey, you need to use this app, for them to acknowledge, like, I don't know what your relationship with like food has been in the past or your body, but this app can be really triggering for some people. And let's talk about how we need you to use it and why, and the parts of it that we don't need you to use. Because I think that would have been a really helpful conversation for me. So I wouldn't have gotten so overwhelmed of like, oh, this wants me to track a lot of stuff. And my doctor didn't need all that. And even just recognizing like, hey, this could be really triggering. Like, where are you at with that? I think just even brings that conversation into the room.
Okay. I like that idea.
Thanks, Laura.
So I have.
Oh, April, you can go ahead.
Oh no, I was back to something about the question that had popped out of just like some warning signs, even for yourself or for other people. I think Emma touched on a lot of really great ones. And I also think about compensating type of behaviors is usually a warning sign of when people will say like, oh, I'm gonna have this because I'm about to do X, Y, and Z. That's usually definitely a warning sign. And it's, even though a lot of people do and say those things, you can still gently like, I won't say call somebody out, like not necessarily in front of other people, but you can just like check in with them like, hey, I know that you said that you're gonna go like run after this, but I was just wanted to check in with you of like, do you feel like you need to run because of what we're eating? Like we can, maybe eat something different, or, just give some type of like, just showing that you're there to support them in whatever it is that they are deciding to do with what they're about to consume or not consume, for that matter. But definitely compensating behavior. So that can be everything from working out, it can be eating less, eating more, it can be going to the sauna, it can be just like other different behaviors, taking laxatives, other type of diet pills, things like that. So I think those are just some other things to think about as far as like warning signs.
All right, Bree, did you have anything to add before we go to the next question?
I answered this one first, actually.
Oh, you did. Okay. Does anyone else have anything to add? That was a long one. Okay, awesome. So our next question is, how do you think the health, nutrition, and fitness industries have influenced women, especially young women, in relation to their bodies and self-image? And has it affected the way you see yourself as well?
Absolutely. Like it's a money on those insecurities that get formed at really early ages. So even young girls wanting to, for instance, like, why do you need workout clothes? You literally can work out in anything, but this idea that like, no, you have to look a certain part. Okay, well, if those clothes don't fit me, then what you're saying is that there's something inherently wrong about me, or how I look, and I'm not somebody who can do those things, right? Even like fitness gyms and all that, like we know how the promotions work. Even like, for instance, my Discover credit card, for the month, they do like quarterly things of what you get extra cash back on. From January to March, the cash back was extra for fitness clubs because they know that people are about to join a bunch of gyms. They're about to spend money on like meal service plan and all those types of things. So it's just capitalism at its finest, colluding with like all of the other not so great things about how we might have a relationship with food, and working out, right? Of I hate running like with a passion. I really hate any type of cardio that like I don't see the purpose of like trying to get my heart rate up. Like I just don't, that's not my jam. But lifting weights, I really do love that, right? But that has been traditionally something that is meant for like men, right? And like has been a thing that people have said, oh, women should shy away from that, right? That's not meant for you. You can get on the elliptical for 2 hours. But rather, you actually have I'm sorry, the comment. I saw the comment. I started reading it. But like you can get on the elliptical for 2 hours, but you can't get on the squat rack. And even being intimidating when you go in those particular settings too. So I think just like the health and fitness industry, they've done a lot to like specifically gear certain exercises, certain workout equipment, certain everything towards certain genders, because they're saying like this is what you are supposed to do because it's what your body should look like, and this is what you're supposed to do because this is what your body should look like. And that backfires in a lot of ways for men and women, especially that we see like with men, a lot of their disordered eating and their like body dysmorphia is really around some of those same standards that same industry holds for them. So it's really icky when you think about it, but it's capitalism is the answer to everything.
And I think something that I've noticed in terms of like health and fitness industries is there's always like a latest fad, a latest trend that's telling us either what we should look like or what we should be eating. I remember there was like the Atkins diet, then the Slim Fast diet, and then there's Whole30, then there's paleo, then there's keto. And we have transitioned from like the much more like thin model heroin chic ideal to then there was the fit body was the ideal body type, and then okay, curvy but only certain kind of curves, and then there's campaigns that come out that are like, okay, these are real bodies, but then those campaigns end up being very like white centric and ableist. And I think there's just always this progression of like, okay, well, you don't, there's pushback on that, let's pick a new thing. But there's always a thing, there's always like an expectation that keeps coming up of like what you should be looking like or what you should be eating, and it may change every few years and adapt, but there's always like, I feel like there's always this inherent right, and if there's an inherent right way to look, that means there's an inherent wrong way to look, and there's not the inclusivity there. And like April said, there's money to be made in that.
I can go next, I guess. So I was an athlete growing up also. I played soccer literally from 4 years old until I was 22. So fitness like was a huge part of my life. And I remember, going to school, going to soccer practice, going to ODP practice, and then going to travel practice, and then coming home and, being told like, okay, it's time to get on the treadmill and run like your 2-mile thing for the day. And it was just like, it was like Christina was saying, it was always this like constant thing that I was trying to like chase after. And I was always comparing myself to my teammates. And like, I think that all of these industries, the one thing that they have in common is that they make us look at the person next to us and say, well, I don't have what they have, so something must be wrong with me. And like, I think if we're able to kind of take a step back from all of that and look at all of these things as how can I use my power and the person that I am and use these things to build myself up. So while fitness and like going to the gym and health and nutrition, like those things are really important, it's not everything. And I think like with anything in life, you know, balance is so crucial. Throughout the first part of my recovery process, I did not step foot in a gym. I actually just recently started going like a couple weeks ago, and it's been like an on and off thing because, you know, like Chris, or I think it was April, you were saying, you know, going over the squat rack and like you feel uncomfortable and you feel like, you know, you have to be a certain way to be standing with those other people that were in there. And like I said, I was an athlete my entire life. Like, you know, I had been in the gym before. So I think like if we continue to kind of break down those barriers and make things more inclusive and make things more about, you know, doing what makes us feel good and makes us be the best versions of ourselves, we kind of like can forget the rest of the noise. But it is hard. And I think with so much outside pressure telling you that, you know, you do have to be a certain way to belong, you can kind of get lost in all of that. But just kind of reconnecting with your morals and who you are as a person and the person that you want to be is always going to take you a lot, I guess, further in life. And the relationship that you have with yourself is the most important one anyways. So
That's beautiful, Emma. I totally agree. Something I was thinking about with this one in terms of like industry is I feel like in these types of circles, we often kind of complain about like the scammy companies, like the multi-level marketing schemes, the shakes and like Beachbody and things like that. But I remember like when I was a nutrition student on the path to become a dietitian, like even the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has the same problem. They'll say, like, don't follow fad diets, eat a balanced diet, eat your vegetables, eat foods that you like, all foods fit, like, as long as you're maintaining a healthy weight. And, you know, people like dietitians who are very like health at every size focused try to push back on that. And they try to say, hey, you're preaching like false information because look at all these studies that show that there is no such thing as a healthy weight. Like, why are you saying this? You're professionals. And it's not being heard and people are leaving the academy. And it's just really disappointing that this is like a very official organization that is still promoting these things that we associate with like Whole30 diets and weight loss shakes and everything like that, skinny tea. And so it's frustrating that it starts that high at the top. But like Emma was saying, like we as individuals kind of have to find out that noise and like trust ourselves and find what works best for us.
All right, awesome. So in what ways has social media, good or bad, influenced your body image? Or what ways have you seen it influence others?
So social media always,
Go
You wanna
ahead.
go, April?
Go ahead,
Okay.
Christina. Go ahead.
I was going to say social media always knows like what you're doing and what's going on in your life. So obviously Instagram knew I had a baby without me telling Instagram. And so a lot of the stuff that I started getting was very centered towards like get your body back post pregnancy. And then even the ones that were like supposed to be more positive about that were like, well, don't worry, 9 months up, 9 months down. So give yourself 9 months. And I'm like, all right, well, so what happens when I've reached that 9 months, or like my kid is much older than he's like 16 months now, and I haven't gotten my like pre-baby body back. And that definitely got to me, still sometimes does, if I'm being honest, of like that idea of getting your body back and that you have to like lose the baby weight, and there's just all that pressure to look like the way you looked before. And I think like it is sometimes alarming how targeted social media can be for like what is going on in your life at the time. And that's still sometimes I catch myself like judging my post baby body in a way that I'm like, that's not helpful self-talk, and trying to ground myself in like, why might I be doing the things that I'm doing? Like if I have the thought of like, oh, I need to go to the park and like go for a walk because I want to like get my post baby body to look different. No. But if I'm like, okay, I need to start going for walks because my toddler is fast and I want to be able to catch him. And like I want to be able to run around with him. Like that's more grounded in my values. But I think it is like it's interesting how much social media adapts to like what you look at and where you're at in your life, and then can find those things that you might be insecure about and be like, here's a targeted ad for that.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I see, well, I like my FBI agent is what I call the whoever is on Instagram monitoring, because I buy so many things based off of what they suggest. But just the idea of the culture of comparison, it just made it easier for us to do that with social media. So while you might not have seen a 10-year challenge, now here we go of everybody comparing their bodies 10 years ago when they were freaking 15 years old. Like that's not realistic or healthy or helpful, for that matter. So that has definitely played a role. I found myself trying to download certain apps to, tune this and tune that. And then like when I catch myself like, why did I even, what that is like, no, that's crazy that I even got to that point. But is it crazy? No, it's not. Like that's what it was created for. There are multiple people using those apps, but it makes you hyper aware of how you look, how you're presenting to other people. And then like we've spent a decent amount of time talking about weight and shape, and there's other parts of body image that we don't acknowledge. And again, this is back to that intersectionality piece of skin color and skin tone, hair texture, eyelashes, nails, all of those things play a role in how we actually view our bodies. And so we know that there are specific standards that are set, not only just by the certain health and wellness industries, right? Like perms were a thing specifically because people wanted their hair to look a certain way. Relaxes were a thing for Black women specifically because we're saying straight hair is better. So all of those things tied in, they tie together. And so I think that we see that play out on social media as well, of like, here's a filter to make your skin a little lighter, right? Like I was upset when sometimes I realized that an app had made my skin look even lighter. Or they try to correct something that is not like, no, I don't need a correction for that. I actually like that part about myself a lot. And so things like that existing are very disturbing. But then on the flip side, I have seen a lot more body positivity, and that being a movement in and of itself, I think has come a lot from social media, of seeing people embrace specific parts of themselves. Me being able to see what childbirth looks like, because we literally have no actual like real things to show us what that means. Like I felt like I was getting another degree learning what pregnancy and giving birth would be like. But I was able to find a lot of things on social media about like how my body would change, what it would even look like for a child to come out of my vaginal canal. Like had no idea or clue of what that would be, but social media provided me that, and me being like, wow, that's so amazing, that's really powerful. Or just seeing other people walk in their own journeys of trying to be more accepting of themselves and loving themselves. So there's definitely it's a double-edged sword, and so I guess it just depends on what you choose to pay attention to on your explore page, because that's the content that you'll end up getting, versus you want to look at this Instagram model, I'll give you more of those people to look at, and that's what your feed looks like. So it definitely is, I guess, an interactive tool in that way. So it can be helpful if you want it to be, or depending on what type of content you're looking at. So, but yeah.
I totally agree. I feel like the algorithm and like the people behind social media, the Zuckerbergs of the world, like they are trying their hardest to push us to buy things, that capitalism piece again, and they're pushing us to feel bad about ourselves and compare ourselves to other people. And it can even go as far as like TikTok will ban like plus size women for wearing bikinis, but will allow straight size women to wear them. But then also, like you said, it's that double-edged sword of like social media gives people a platform who maybe don't have a platform in traditional media. How many cats do you have, Savannah? They're so cute. Me too. Mine are just like at my feet. But yeah, so I guess people have a platform who maybe like aren't traditionally seen in TV or movies or ads. And so it really is about like how we engage with the platform to the best of our ability. Like I remember going through my Explore page and like blocking every single account that was like 1,200 calories is sufficient for an adult woman, because no. And just really trying to like curate my social media to be a positive space, where I feel like I can like log in and not be just like bombarded by all these pictures I don't want to see. And when I say that, I really just mean Instagram, because I haven't figured out a way to make like TikTok or Facebook, do that for me. And Pinterest is just like a garbage fire that is just constantly like, oh, you pinned a salad. Do you want like a 800 calorie meal plan? And it's like, no, leave me alone. So you have to be choosy about your social media these days.
Yeah, I was pretty much going to say the same thing. I think like originally my relationship with social media was really, really bad. I would follow the same kind of girl over and over again and pretty much do anything that I could to figure out how she got her body to look that way. And like, I think we've probably all seen at some point or another, like those what I eat in a day, like vlogs, and those were so bad for me. So I really just like tried to change my perspective and like shift to diversifying my content, like Bree and April both said. And it's really changed my perspective, not just like on my body, but myself and my experiences, and like has made me realize that, there's so much more out there than just this subset of people that I was like hyper fixated on. And I think if you take the chance to open yourself up to other people's experiences and like see what other people look like and live like and what their thought processes are, it really can honestly just help you grow to be a better, more well-rounded person. And I think that's the point of social media, is to really connect with people and share what you're creating and share like your thoughts and your visions and your dreams. It's not meant to be this dumpster fire like Bree said, where we all get sucked into comparing the person who comes in the scroll after us. Like social media has become something that's all about this highlight reel, whereas like it's not really highlighting what is actually real. And like, again, we're all human, we all have struggles, we all face things that aren't like perfectly curated like we see a lot of the time. So I think taking a step back and realizing that has been a huge plus and growth for me with my social media, aside from also diversifying who I follow. So
I definitely love that it was brought up how social media can be a good thing and also a bad thing. I definitely resonate with that. I can remember when Instagram first came out and it was so different than what it is now. I think like most people used to post like what they were eating, or like, I don't know. I think my very first post was me like in very 2012 fashion, like pointing at a stop sign, like I was like in 10th grade or something. Like that was my first post on Instagram. And that's probably not even something I would ever post. But like back then, it was just such an innocent thing. And it really kind of turned into something that can be extremely toxic, but also it opens up so many gateways to seeing other people's experiences. And like Emma was saying, there's so much out there than just, the subset of people that you may follow. Like on the Explore page, you can find so many different things, whether that be good or bad. But, and then I had kind of a shift into a positive experience with social media, sharing my story and seeing how it impacted others, and seeing that positivity be passed on was a very good thing and a very good feeling. And I did eventually have to shift my follower group, because I was following, like Emma was saying, I was following Instagram models and like Victoria's Secret models and things like that, and that's just like very toxic. So shifting kind of who you follow helps tremendously. And then also just social media breaks in general. I take very long social media hiatuses. So that I find that to be very helpful. Just like taking a break and like taking a second to be in real life is super important. So yeah. Okay, so we have one more question, and it kind of piggybacks off of the last question, but how do you think social media has influenced society's view of women's bodies as a whole in the last like 5 to 10, maybe even 15 years since it's like come about? I think especially with the incoming of TikTok, I think that's been a big one as well. That's kind of influenced society's view of women's bodies, but I kind of would be interested to see what you all think as well.
Something I was thinking about with this was like the evolution from the Tumblr girl to the Instagram model to now there's this trend on TikTok where it's like that girl. And it's not all about your body, but it is. It's like wake up at 5, go for a run, eat a smoothie bowl, take a selfie, do a workout, take another selfie, do some journaling. And it's all about just like being as productive as possible. But there's so many little undertones where I'm like, oh, this is so. And it's young people who are watching it and thinking like, oh my gosh, this is the lifestyle I can have. So there's almost kind of like a cycle of like we lose like the Tumblr girl thinspo, we go to fitspo, and now we're going to like, I don't know what to call it, like productive spo. And it's very cyclical, but I do feel like we are slowly having this pattern of like moving up and away from where we were 10 years ago.
Yeah,
I literally, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say what Bree was saying was reminding me of the idea of like grind culture, which I think like can apply so much to like just like, you know, how you eat and working out and things like that. And then also, Emma, what you were saying like before about like the idea of things being curated, I think especially in the last 5 to 10 years with social media, I think people are seen in such little snippets of like what their actual lives are and who they are on a more like holistic level. And I think those snippets can be so curated that like we kind of like lose that big picture, and it can lead to some of that like toxic positivity and stuff like that. And I think then going back up to following like who you want to see on social media. I think the people that I've been following more often lately have been, there's this like one woman who puts on a robe in the morning and then goes out in the yard and shouts at the universe. And I'm like, yep, that's the kind of content I need, that is not this like super, like obviously it's still curated, but it's not just showing that like here's the positive, here's like all the great things I do in a day, because I think that fuels that like comparison. And what we know with research of like when people take in a lot of that content, it actually fuels depressive symptoms, because they're consistently comparing themselves and going, my life's not this happy, my life's not this perfect, because they're just seeing those snippets of other people's lives. So I'm like, if I want to see snippets, I want to see like the weird, the angry, the random, like if we're going to do snippets, let's do like the messy ones.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I actually wrote down the exact same bad girl phrase in my notes. So I think it's safe to say that we're all seeing a little bit of that. But I like with my experience and the reason that I really wanted to start my brand that's called Evolve was to really put that representation out there and not just have, inclusivity being these tiny little campaigns where we sprinkled in like one plus size model, one model with a disability, one person of color. It was like, we're really trying to have these conversations, put these conversations on social media to invite other people into, learn from each other, and figure out how we can move forward to change the narrative and change what we are seeing out there. And I think it has been really impactful because, we're trying to create a place where people feel like they can belong and they feel like they can be comfortable and be themselves, and they don't have to show up and, feel like they have to change something about themselves to look like the next person after them. So I definitely wanted to touch on that. And then also just saying, like, I think social media has become really cool in the aspect that we are seeing a lot of creators who, are taking their experiences at clothing stores and saying, your brand doesn't fit anything, like I can't fit into anything at your brand. You need to change your clothes to fit me. I'm not changing my body to fit into your clothes anymore. And I think like as consumers, we kind of forget that we are the ones that have the purchasing power. And when you kind of take that back and call these brands out on these things, whether it's beauty, fashion, like whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You're putting the pressure and the onus on them to step up and meet these standards that we are trying to set for ourselves now, where everyone gets a chance to be seen and heard and feel included. Because inclusivity, like I said, isn't just sprinkling a couple people in here and there. It's actually listening to what we have to say and meeting what those needs are. So yeah, I agree with everyone. Has been, a slippery slope in the past, but I have high hopes for where it's going and will continue to go. So.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I would add to this, what we've been talking about, is more so I think how I have experienced it has really been from a place of like who I choose to follow, right? And so I've seen a lot more diversity in bodies. I've seen a lot more diversity in skin tones. I've seen diversity in just like how people show up in the world. So like whether it's people that decide not to shave, for instance, or maintain these other unrealistic beauty standards that we have. It's been really helpful to see that I'm not crazy, right? Of like how I'm consuming my world. Like I know that that's probably not normal, but you still try to maintain because you think that it is. So seeing other people also push back has been really helpful for me, and I think it's been helpful for shaping, just like realistically, like sometimes we are, like we talked about before, our bodies are objectified, and so we also sometimes think that we need to meet a certain standard for men or for other people to find us attractive. But then when those people actually get on social media and say none of that is attractive to me, that has been helpful for, I know that some groups of people of feeling like, oh well, I didn't even know that you like these roles and you like that extra back fat, like that's something that people are actually talking about on social media, versus that there was no place for us to talk about that, right? You just assume that you kind of maintain this certain figure because that's what your mom and your grandma said you should do, even though that's not actually realistically what somebody even finds appealing about you. So I think just like on some of the plus side of seeing some brands also respond to the buying power, like Emma said, of the consumers, of I love seeing brands get put on blast. This is like literally I live for it. Of you don't have the right shade of foundation for me, or your product is damaging in this way, or you definitely don't fit, like Fabletics. Like I hadn't looked at Fabletics in years, and now I went to their page and I'm like, oh, y'all got like 3X, 4X. When did this happen? And so just even seeing those things, I'm like, oh, maybe this is a brand that I might try again, or maybe this is something that might be comfortable for my body, or somebody I'm willing to give my money to. And so I think social media has put some onus on companies to actually, you know, respond to the people that you're supposedly serving. And that has been, I think, helpful. So I guess on just like the flip side of some of the positive things, I think we definitely know how it's negatively impacted some things, but there is quite a few positives.
Great. Thanks so much. So those are all the questions I have for our panelists. If anyone else has questions for them, feel free to go ahead and ask. You can unmute or put it in the chat. Or if our panelists have anything else to add, they can do so as well.
I just have one quick thing. If anyone is interested, the National Eating Disorders Association walk will be live in Richmond in person on April 16th. It's at Deep Run Park. Miss Savannah here is actually going to be one of the speakers. So we're super excited, but it'll be from 9 to 12. You can donate, come out and walk. You can come hang out with the DJ and me if you want to, but I will drop the registration link in the chat for you guys.
Thanks, Emma. All right, well, if no one else has anything to add, this was really great. This is the second time doing this event, so I'm very happy with the way it turned out. And the recording will be shared with everyone who registered, so that's going to happen. if you all want to reach out to me directly about anything, feel free to. I think you all have my email. So if the panelists have nothing else, I'd say give you back 23 minutes of your time. So awesome. Thank you for all the comments. Cool. Well, I hope you all have a good evening and hope to see you soon in some capacity.
This was really great.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing.
Thank you for coming. Thank you so much.